Given that we're going to have a hard stop at 1 p.m., I want to get things rolling. Just to describe how this came to be, Teachers on Teaching is meant to be an opportunity for people across disciplines to learn from one another and to engage in conversation. When we started, we knew we wanted to hear some things from Sandi Connelly out of biology, and we spent some time circling around what should the topic be. We kept it fairly open-ended, but hopefully specific enough that you can bring your good questions and your good ideas about how to take safe risks in teaching. You know, I hear from teachers often that they know they want to change some things, but they also don't want to waste valuable time by failing. So I'll turn it over to Sandi at this time, but think about your own good questions about how to take safe experiments in expanding or changing your teaching practice.
Yeah. Okay, so a little bit about my background, since I know a few of you, but not all of you. I've been at RIT for, God, 9 years now, and started out as a lecturer, came in teaching heavy loads, basically to break up a gen ed intro bio class that now I have somehow taken over entirely in tenure track and quadrupled the enrollment, so I'm not really sure how I benefited from what I was doing there. But that course is kind of my service course, my gen ed course. It's where I can play around a lot, frankly, because they're non-majors. So it gives me an opportunity to say, you know, I'm going to try this today. If it doesn't work and they don't get the exact concept, it isn't the end of the world, right? Foundationally, they're not going to have to recall this 3 years from now in a majors course, so I'm not as concerned about it. It also has allowed me to teach this course now 4 different ways. I teach the course online entirely. It's a synchronous online from the standpoint that they have homeworks due at the same time. Their exams are the same dates, but everything else is essentially on their own with video lectures that I've made for the course. And then I teach the large lecture style, which is about 240 students enrolled in it right now in the big classroom in Gosnell. I teach a flipped class version of it. So they have videos that they watch outside of class, come in, and we do activities the entire time. And then I have a small classroom that Colin got to observe last week that I'm teaching in the new classroom in Eastman, the steel case classroom that they put into Eastman with essentially all movable furniture kind of idea, and that's the idea in there of group work and small group design sorts of things. So it really has allowed me to sort of say, all right, I can work online with folks where they actually never see me, right? I'm actually not in my videos, it's just my voice, up through the small class kind of style, up through giant lecture, I'm a talking head in the front of the room, to think about the differences in delivery. But I found myself using the same techniques more and more across all of my classes regardless. Which I always thought, and when I talk to folks, they're like, well, you'll never use the same things in an online course that you use in your giant lecture course, and it turns out that I actually am using a lot of the same things. So I may do them differently just because of sheer numbers of students, but it doesn't mean that the approach or the technique or the outcome is different in those sorts of things. So, and then I teach I teach 3 different majors courses. They're typically 40 or 50 students from sophomore up through senior level kind of things. And I've started to use more of the techniques in my majors courses that I found worked for my non-majors. So I'm using kind of my non-majors class as my sandbox, and then my majors class so that they don't flip out entirely, things that work. But I've actually found that some of them that go through my non-majors class and decide to take up a bio minor are in my majors class then, and they're like, are you going to do the same thing we did before? I really like that. And so to me, that's reinforcement of I did something that was okay, at least for some of them. It's not going to be perfect for all of them. When you deal with 450 students in a class, it's not going to be perfect for all of them. It just won't work. So the idea of trying to streamline things, 2 weeks behind on grading is a familiar thing to me. So how do we kind of streamline things to make things so the students are still getting feedback and can build on it, but don't you're not spending more time grading it than they actually spent on the assignment, which I find myself trying to think about a lot. And then the idea of repetition of learning. I find for most of my students, my majors and non-majors, the structured learning component becomes very important. And the idea that I may ask them essentially the same question 3 or 4 times in 3 or 4 different ways on 3 or 4 different assessments actually has become very important for them in understanding what's important to me. How many times can I say important? What's critical as far as learning outcomes for the course, what they need to actually be taking away, what I could actually go back and assess if I really wanted to. Okay. So questions on that before I welcome?
Hi.
How are you?
Please.
Oh, you're fine. You're fine. Quick introduction.
Sure. I'm Pat Newcomb. I'm an OBGYN, and I'm also the academic coordinator for the physician assistant program here. So I had quite a culture shock introduction to undergraduate education because I came from teaching graduate medical residents to teaching.
Oh, that's the same thing. Oh, that.
So I've had this experience of, feeling I know what works and having it really not work out.
Right.
That's why I'm here.
Right. Great. Okay. Questions on that stuff so far? Any thoughts? Randomness?
Just one quick thought.
Yeah, Jim.
A couple, I'm hearing about managing risks and making sure the teaching is working, but also making sure that the course evaluations are sufficiently satisfied, right? And those, in my mind, they feel like 2 different things. So, for example, I guess I wonder whether a course evaluation is a satisfaction survey, whether students are qualified to evaluate the course. And I'm not sure, Tom raised a great question. I've added writing to my course. How do I know it's helping? And I don't think the course eval is going to get at that. So I'm especially interested in meaningful measures of seeing whether the interventions that we're proposing are
Actually
meaningfully changing learning.
Right. So to your first question, no, the students are not qualified to evaluate the course. They're not. If you really sit back and look at it, with a list of learning outcomes for the course, okay, let me retract that. Some of them are. Some of them will give you the feedback that you need. If you ask them, was this writing assignment something that allowed you to better grasp this concept? Some of them are going to say, yes, and this is why. Some of them are going to say no, because they didn't like doing the writing assignment, which tells you absolutely nothing, right? Some of them will say no because they got a bad grade on it. Again, tells you nothing. So it comes back to the idea with these online course evaluations that we have become so focused on, but that are not course specific unless you make them course specific, right? And we only have the option of adding 3 questions, I think, to the online course evaluation. I think it's 3 or 4 to the online course evaluations to make them course specific. But otherwise it's very vague. Did the instructor come to class prepared? Okay. What, were they engaging with the material? Okay. These are things that I've seen over the years. The students will say, yes, she's engaging with the material. Yes, she comes to class prepared. But in the notes, then they'll say, class was fine, but I don't really like the way she teaches. Well, okay. Again, it's that idea of what are they really evaluating, and you're right, I think it is more of a satisfaction survey with the course. Now, does that mean that they're not useful to someone? I'm not sure. What I found much more useful are I was calling them midterm evaluations when we were in quarters, but now that we're in semesters, I guess I need to call them, I don't know, third term evaluations, I'm not sure. I do them every 5 weeks. And essentially I ask the students 3 questions. What are your 2 favorite things about the course today? What are your 2 least favorite things about the course as of today? And if I made you the instructor tomorrow, what would you change about your 2 least favorite things? And to me that has been the most, and then I give them an open-ended what are your other rants, raves, comments, suggestions? And they're all anonymous, and I do them pen to paper because I found that the online surveys, they tend to shy away from. Now with my online class, they're stuck doing an online survey to do this.
In the classroom?
I do it in the classroom and say, all right, look, this is, you know, do it or not, totally up to you. No names, I'm not grading these, you know. But what I'm looking for is feedback that will change the structure of the course for that course. Right now, those students today. Because I remember being a student filling out course evaluations and saying, okay, well, it's in week 15, I'm filling out a course evaluation that does absolutely nothing for the course I just took. So I'm really helping my friends next year. Well, who cares about them, you know, right? So this gives me an opportunity to stop and say, okay, if in week 6 I need to stop giving this type of worksheet, I need to stop doing this, they don't like this color on the slide, I can change it right there. You know, it's not a big deal. It's the idea that they then have some say in the course structure. And it completely changes the dynamic of the course after I do it the first time. Because they realize that, because the day after I do the evaluations in class, we go in and I pull out the evaluations that, now out of 250, right? I'm pulling the ones that are, you have a lot that are similar. I'm pulling ones that are suggesting dynamic changes to the course. And I essentially go in and say, all right, here we go. And I put them on the overhead, on the dot cam, and say, I've got one student that says the course is moving too fast. I got one student that says the course is moving too slow. What are we doing about this? And you get the kids going, oh, well, I didn't know that so-and-so beside me thought it was going too fast. I'm kind of bored. Well, okay, you're kind of bored because you're a physician's assistant major in a non-major's biology class, you know? And, you know, yeah, you're kind of bored with the skeletal system, but when we get to plants, the kid beside you is going to kick your butt because they actually have some interest in gardening, right? So it's that kind of weird dynamic in my non-majors class. But it also lets us say things like, they actually want me to take more pauses. So I changed the class to a 75-minute class on Tuesday, Thursday. It used to be a 50-minute. And I talk fast. I admit that. The interpreting students have actually done studies in my class, and they've clocked me at 258 words a minute. So literally 258 words a minute on average. So I know that I talk too fast for most of the students in my course. I get that. My interpreters are fantastic, and they've been with me for years for a reason, because they're the only ones that are keeping up.
Get a speeding ticket.
I do get a speeding ticket and occasionally the interpreter will say, okay, you need chamomile today, not the double shot espresso.
Are they doing this in
And they occasionally do that. When my freelance interpreters come in, my sub-interpreters come in and are doing this, I'm like, yeah, you don't want to come back here again. But so the students told me, we want breaks, like mental breaks. So I have literally now starting this week, because I gave the evaluation last week, I literally have put slides in that say pause. And I tell them, I say, beside the pause, what are we going to do for this pause? Is it a tech break? Do you get 3 minutes to check your Facebook? Okay. Is it, I call them physiology breaks. Do you need to run and get something to eat? Because you're not because some of them are booked in class from 8 to 8. So do they need to run and get a snack because they're not going to make it through? They need a potty break, the whole deal, right? Or is it a pause where we're going to watch a TED Talk on something fun that goes along with our topic? So it's a mental break in that I'm not going to test them on the material, but it's a different direction for a minute. Or is it a break where they're going to have to actually work on a worksheet with a group? Something like that. So it has, because I had promised them breaks, and I actually had a kid call me a liar on the evaluation last week because I didn't give them all the breaks I promised. But I get in there, like so many of us, and they were like, okay, I have 872 slides I have to cover in the next 2 days. Here we go. But it also becomes, they're not retaining anything when I do that. So do I end up dropping out things? Because I'd rather have them focus on the things that I think they need to carry with them. And those pauses have become really important for me, to stop and say, all right, where are we right now? What have we learned so far today? Where do we have to get for the rest of the day? So those have become much more important to me than the end of the course evaluation sorts of things. And I think they're more important to the students too. They don't want to come to a class they don't want to be in, right? That they're not enjoying. So if they have some ownership of the structure of the course, I think they feel a lot more compassion and interest in the course materials. Yeah, Michael.
Could you say the 3 questions?
The 3 questions again?
One more time.
Your 2 favorite things about the course, your 2 least favorite things about the course, and if I made you instructor tomorrow, what would you change about your 2 least favorite things? How would you make them better? Yeah. And some of them had great suggestions. Yes?
I use the same kind of approach. I usually ask them about what do I do that I should keep doing?
Uh-huh.
What do I do that I should stop doing?
Right.
And what am I not doing that I should start doing?
Okay. Do you do them at the end of the semester, or do you do them midterm? Okay. So you're giving them a chance to give you some feedback, and do you discuss them with them at all?
Occasionally.
Occasionally?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm not disciplined that I do it every time. So.
Well, they seem to really like that. They feel like you've read them. If you go in, even for 2 minutes at the beginning of the next class, or sometimes I'll put up a slide. If there were a lot of comments about a particular thing, I'll put up a slide that has responses from the survey or evaluations, and here are the kind of top responses. And it lets them know you're listening, kind of thing. Because you may change things in response to that, but they don't pay any attention to the fact that you've changed them because of that. Yeah. Yes,
What I was going to say is, while I was listening to you, I keep thinking about this past week, my wife went to staff development. She works at Honey Falls Lima as an elementary teacher. Been there 25 years, loves her job. And the staff development was all about grading.
Oh.
And, so as you were talking about your surveys and the comments, it's exactly what you learned this past week, that grade numbers really don't help students want to improve or understand what they did well and what they don't do. The comments do. So they actually compared, a couple of researchers handed out exams with grades, with comments, and grades and comments. And the ones that just had comments really were the ones that students liked the best that helped them improve their skills.
Right.
That's exactly what you're talking about now.
Right.
You're doing comments from students which are helping you improve your classroom.
Right.
If they just gave you a 1, 2, 3, or 4, or 5,
Means
you'd
nothing.
be like, how's this helping?
Right.
So
Right.
when we talk about experimenting in our classrooms, then maybe that's something we should be trying. Is maybe not all of our assessments have a 1 through 100 or a 0 to 10, but a comment, and then a number grade, so that you can get in the system that my courses wants.
Right.
But maybe we should be thinking about that too as part of our experimentation.
Oh, most certainly.
Can you summarize that for the recording?
So the idea that giving students just numerical grades is not as effective as giving them just comments, even over giving them grades plus comments, which I think a lot of us are doing now in our courses, is especially writing courses, are giving grades. There's something numeric that goes into the grade book, but then we're trying to give them some level of feedback associated with it. Especially in a writing intensive course, that's part of the criteria of a writing intensive course, is the students have to have feedback that they can build upon in the future version of said writing assignment, right? But the idea that having comments alone that you hand back to the students might be something very interesting to consider. And the idea that maybe not every assignment needs a numerical value, right? We tend to get very stuck with that because there are places in our grade book that need to be filled before we get to the end of 15 weeks. But if the grades aren't meaning a lot to the students, as in for us, 0 through 10 on an evaluation ranking means very little to many of us, I think, at this point. I know we have the bean counters are making sure that we're all above X level, and that's what many of us are worried about. But is that truly what is going to improve the course? If you tell me I have a 5 out of 10 on an evaluation, I'm just going to go home and get mad and have a beer. That doesn't mean I'm going to change anything about my course, right? But if my students say, hey, I really love this worksheet, but it was too long, it was too complicated. I really love that every day we get a note card that lets me tell you what the most confusing point is so we can fix it. If that's what works for my students, that's what I'm going to change in my course, right? So it's fascinating. They're working on that in staff development and of things too now, to say, all right, let's step back. And I mean, it's funny because I know every time I get a survey and I can't click 1 through 5, it's just all open boxes, I don't do it. Because I don't want to take the time to do it. I'll click numbers and give them to you, but I don't want to fill in all the fluff. But the fluff is what I think we really have to guide ourselves towards now, and make some conscious efforts to think about that more. I actually think I'm going to ask my students how they feel if I don't grade a worksheet, if I just give them comments on it. I've started doing it in my small class with my there's 26 in there? I think there's 26 in there now. By allowing them to choose the format of their exams. And it can change every single time, I don't care. You know, I'm only writing it for 26 of them, so if they want all essays, I'll grade all essays for 26. I won't do it for 400 in my big classes, but for the 26, yeah, okay. And I gave them the option. I gave them, you know, I essentially put on the board multiple choice, true, false, matching, what, you know, essays, short answers, fill-ins, diagrams. What do you want? And then I leave an other. You know, you tell me how you want to be assessed on this stuff. And my small class actually came up with, they want to do presentations for their last exam. And they want to make videos like I make for them for the materials. They want to make videos to show me that they know the material. So I said, alrighty. So I said, I don't want you to do that I'm trying to collect data between my small class, my large class, and my online. I said, so I need you to bear with me on some of the qualitative stuff and quantitative stuff as I outline it for the first couple exams, but for your last exam, we'll do whatever you want. And so their last exam's not till the first week of May, and they're already like, so for my presentation that I'm going to do for my last exam, I'm like, we haven't even covered the materials yet, but it's something that they're all geared up about, and it changes the entire dynamic of the room and the course, which is, and I think for that, I don't know how I would give it a quantitative score. Yes, you know the material, but is it A-level mastery, B-level, you know, that kind of thing. I think it's going to have more of a feel of kind of maybe, I envision like a fine arts evaluation as opposed to a scientific biology-based evaluation.
You can develop a rubric, and I think I have one for presentations. It has columns and numbers assigned to it.
Right.
But it allows you to give it to them ahead of time, so that they make sure they follow all those columns and make sure, and then you can ask other faculty, well, you probably know this, and they can help evaluate too, and then it's a little more meaningful because they got 5 professors that are watching instead of their peers.
When I do in-class evaluations, I often have peers and faculty come in. I always take cookies, so I tell the faculty, you know, come get your afternoon sugar break and evaluate a couple of presentations, and that seems to go, they do like that a lot better. And certainly rubrics ahead of time help a lot of those things. But for the things you really want to do that are fun and different, designing a rubric ahead of time may be challenging. Right. So I've been doing a lot with, like I mentioned, I probably keep staples in business with the number of note cards I use in class. Almost every day my students are doing, I'd say every day, they're using a note card to either give me feedback on what they don't understand, give me feedback on what they do understand in the classrooms, and their little mental breaks. That seems to work really well for students. Sorry, Joe, I moved.
You're good.
Okay. But those sorts of things. It turns out for most of my students that the more active they are in the materials, of course, the more they seem to take away from it. So I made up graphs, totally made up. The students think they're from some peer-reviewed source somewhere. No, totally made them up. The amount of time that they spend in their seats is inversely proportional to the amount they learn, especially for my flipped class, because I want them up and moving around and talking to each other. We do a lot of jigsaws. So are you guys all familiar with jigsaws? So I break my class into groups of 3 or 4 typically. And I let them self-select. A lot of folks have strategies on how to assign groups and are worried about assigning groups, and I'm not going to worry about it to that level. But what I do is within that group, then they count off 1 through 4 or 1 through 3, whatever I've done that day, and randomly I'll pick who's going to be the expert for their group. And the experts all have to actually get together into a large cohort and learn something either from me, from one of the LAs, from something they have to read, and then they have to take that information back and give it to their group. And so they have now become the experts in the sense that they're the only ones that know that particular topic, that they now have to convey to their group, and then their group has to build on that idea something that I assign for them. And it's actually, you can divide it up so that everybody in the group has to go and learn a different thing and then all come back and put an idea together. Or you can do it where it's essentially a feeder kind of style, where you do have one person that truly is sort of the expert on it and has to feed out. And it keeps them up and moving around and engaged with one another. They're learning something from each other. I tell them if they can teach the material, they have a much better sense of what they really know and don't know. And so that one works very well. In a class under the size of about 100. Once it gets over 100, it's like, it's just chaos. And we can't find the experts, and so it gets a little messy. So that one I've done a lot, with very low risk associated with it, right? They tend to find themselves excited to call themselves an expert on something for a little while in a class that they would not normally call themselves an expert in any way. And we sort of build on that. So that's been a fun one. But before I do any of my many of you are concerned about evaluation sorts of things and tenure promotion sorts of things. Before I do anything that's going to cause complete upheaval in my class, I talk to my department chair. And I say, look, this semester we're going to try this. And usually he looks at me like I've got 12 horns and I've turned 58 shades of purple while sitting there talking to him. But I'm like, all right, look, I think it's going to help on this particular topic, but I want to use it on lots of topics so they get used to doing it. So it's essentially building a style into the class. And I said, I'm not going to guarantee you that this is going to go well. There may be students in your office complaining. There may be bad course evaluations, but I want your support that if I push this through, there's a reason I want to do it. And the hope is in the end, then you take away and say, yeah, it went really well, right? But if you don't, you can still get something out of it. And for many of us now, scholarship is going to be very focused in our teaching, right? So the idea that we can take what we do in the classroom and publish it is huge now for so many of us. So the idea that things may go really well and could be published, and the things may not go well at all and can still be published, is something that we need to keep in mind. There are lots of course sources. The one I see a lot now, it's primarily biology at the moment, but there are lots of others that are stemming off of that now. Course source is great in that they will actually, if you contact them and say, look, I'm trying this in my course, I really want to publish it, how can I make sure that it's publishable when I'm done? And they told, the woman, Robin Wright, that started it out of Minnesota, was actually here a couple of weeks ago. And she said, look, even if you're not in biology, we'll help you get a sense just by looking at our website of what is needed for a publishable education journal. So it's great in that there are people out there now that are kind of shepherding the rest of us through these processes to make sure that we get all the publications that we need for tenure or promotion now, right? And that we're maintaining that level of dissemination. That's not only important, well, RIT finds it very important, right? But it's also important for us because having our stuff out there means that we're also looking at everybody else's things that are out there. So we're not reinventing the wheel. Because there's a lot of good stuff out there. There's a lot of junk out there too. But there's a lot of good stuff out there that folks are working on. So when I think about kind of that safety net, it's a safety net from moment to moment in my class with my students. Are we getting feedback as we go and not just at the end, which makes no difference? So versus the safety net of kind of career safety net, right? So how do we get to the point where we can use these things to further our careers and to help others, kind of things. So I'm gonna totally stop talking now. Thoughts? Yeah, Tom.
Do you ever run into the situation where you ask students these types of questions, and they essentially say, well, they don't want to write or they don't want to read?
Oh, yes.
And I remember a couple of years ago, we brought, I forget the guy's name, and did that big study, and students all said it, they do less reading and writing in college than they did in high school. Remember that study? And I think, oh my God, you know, we start responding. Who is it?
Was it called academically?
I think that was it, yeah. The author came and spoke. And I think if we listen to the students, they say, well, I hate the book. Okay, well, I don't use that. And all of a sudden, you're not using a book, you know?
Right.
That kind of thing.
Right. And there are, I am actually surprised at the number of courses on campus now that have abandoned textbooks. For various reasons. Some folks are like, I don't want my kids spending $400 on a textbook. And other folks are like, I'll give the kids whatever they need to know. So is that the academically adrift?
Yes,
Yep.
that was it.
Yep.
Remember
Yep.
when he was here a couple years ago?
Yep. And there's actually a new one out now. He's got a new one out now. So,
Speaking here in May.
yeah, he's coming back in May.
Was he? It was stunning, the things that he was saying. He wasn't talking about RIT, he was talking about academia
yeah.
in general.
We don't have those problems here. The students love to read and write. I mean, I get a lot of kickback. Actually, I think my favorite is in my online course. I did the midterm kind of evaluations with my online course. I've been teaching this one now a year. Yeah, a year now. And their evaluations last week, I do in survey on Blackboard since I don't see them face-to-face, pen to paper, but they said, so for my course, they use my courses, they use the publisher's software for homework, and I have them using something called Top Hat, which is an online survey question homework sort of thing that we were using in class a lot until we kept crashing the internet in our building by using it. Yeah, so we stopped that. But my online class said, I don't know why we have to use so many websites and do things online. And I did I'm not sure where this is coming from. So, and that my flipped class, which all by design is they watch videos and come in and do things in class that are active. And they can elect to be in that or they can elect to be in the large lecture. So now some of them are limited by schedule, so timing, they're sort of stuck in that class. But I get well, I don't know why we have to watch videos outside of class and then still come to class. Well, okay. Yeah.
Do you have, in your online class, do you have discussions going on?
I have discussions on the wiki going on, but they're not always group discussions. Sometimes it's just post, and then they can comment on each other's posts, but it's not a woven discussion, so to speak.
Are the students active?
No, they hate it.
Right.
They hate online discussion.
What do you do about that?
We give them zeros. It's been very difficult, and that's why I've actually, and I hate to say it, but I've moved away from many of the online discussions. Because it's not telling me anything. If you choose not to participate just because you don't want to do a discussion doesn't mean you don't know anything about the material. So what they're actually doing for me now, my online class due next week, I've given each of them 2 very umbrella kind of questions on the topics we're currently covering. And they have to submit an 8-minute video to me answering the questions. So it doesn't have to be anything fancy. They can do it on their phones. I ask them just to turn their phones sideways so they're not tall and skinny, but that you know, and I tell them I have a 2-page instruction sheet for it, basically saying, you know, this is not best supporting actor material. I want you to be able to convey to me information in a verbal or signed form, whichever you're most comfortable with. And I also have them now submitting, along with that, a detailed outline So I said, it behooves you to write your outline first, and then, so I'm trying to get them to kind of prepare that sort of material. Online, it's very difficult to get them engaged in any discussion that I've found. Some of them are very good. They want to do that. They're, I think they're probably, one hand is on my discussion board and one hand is on Facebook. I mean, I think they're those kind of people. But for others, it doesn't work. Many of them, I've talked to a lot of folks that many students want a completely asynchronous online course. They never want to have to meet as a group online. They don't want to have to do that. And for some of them, timing is an issue. As far as literally time zones are an issue. So not being able to sync up at proper times. Some of them are working 40, 60 hours a week, trying to take these online courses in addition. So the best online discussions that I've had going are, I will post a statement and they have to respond to that statement, and then so we have to get a thread going, and I tell them that no one gets a grade for it unless everyone has contributed. So they actually start bothering one another. So-and-so, you haven't posted yet. When are you going to post? Those kinds of things. And there's one kid in my online class that hasn't done a single thing. I don't think he even knows he's registered for the class. And I've emailed him like 4 times. I'm like, dude, do you even know you're in here? He hasn't written back. So I tell the students, forget about student X, Y, and Z. Don't worry about them. I'm going to scale it based on the people that are actually participating. So that has actually caused them to sort of bug one another. That worked well in week 2. We tried it again last week, and next to no one participated. They've gotten to the point where they don't even care about the score associated with it. So we're back to the idea of, do grades really influence practice, basically? No.
I tried an experiment last semester where I had a class on Monday and Wednesday, Tuesday and Thursday, and I developed a project, and I assigned partners on their opposite day class.
Ooh.
And so then they had to post to the wiki to communicate back and forth. And it was really good. I mean, I could see what they were doing. I could see the kids that were slugs, the ones that were working,
right.
So that forced them to communicate because they had a partner in a different class.
So if they have a partner in a different class, so it's a face-to-face class, right?
Yes.
But you're still using the wiki to moderate or mediate discussions, basically, for them, right?
And communicate. They were like, they were setting up an imaging server.
Okay.
And so one student would work an hour on setting up, downloading it, updating it, getting it ready, prepared, and they had to document what they had done that day. So the next day the student could continue on the process and not overlap or do the same things again.
Gotcha.
So it really got a lot more on there because they weren't in the same class.
Right. Did you see any of them or have any evidence that some of them were trying to actually meet up outside of class?
I saw them in the hallways discussing and talking.
Okay.
On Fridays.
Okay.
There was some concern about privacy. Some of them didn't want anybody else to see what they were posting, so they wouldn't get all what they were doing on their servers. So it was a good experiment.
Yeah.
Well.
Yeah. Is it something you'll repeat?
Yeah, I'm not doing the same thing this semester because it's 3 of the same classes, but it wouldn't work out.
Right.
Yeah, I'll try it
right.
again.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. And many folks really like the wiki because of its ability to track every change by every individual and see who's really putting the thought in, right? Because we always get those complaints, I think, from groups in our face-to-face classes. I did all the work, they didn't do anything, why did they get the same grade I got? But in the wikis, I think it really gives us an opportunity, even in a face-to-face class, to say, I know that Susie did these things, I know that Jimmy did these things, and you can't, unless you're logging on as one another, you can't debate who's putting in the time. And I think then comments and assessment are much more fair in a way in group activities. Yeah, Jeremy.
You mentioned that when you try new things, you loop in your department chair just so they're aware.
Right.
To what extent do you give students a heads up, or to what extent should you even give students a heads up that you're trying new things?
I never tell my students that I'm trying something new for the first time. They will gut you like a fish from day one. No, it is no.
Just the normal way.
The fastest way to torpedo anything you're doing is to go in and say, we're going to try something today. No. Yeah. So but it is kind of scary because you have to go in confident, like you've done this 100 times, and it may crash and burn, and that's just kind of the way it goes. That's one of the risks. Yeah, with anything new. Yeah. Do you have anything, Pat? Okay. And he left before you could ask him your. Yeah.
You know, this class that I'm doing, this is the first time I'm doing it. The students know it's never been offered before. So everything is, I can't.
Right. Oh, we've done this before 100 times, it's fun.
I haven't done anything ever.
Right. But there's a lot, I mean, the students are telling me more and more that they're seeing similar patterns in their courses. Even if they aren't in like a full flipped course or something like that, they see similarities between some things, and they're becoming more comfortable with, I think, working in groups a little bit more. Even though they don't like to do it all the time, I think it's helping that way. But, yeah.
Actually, I do have a question.
Yeah, Pat.
Do you have any advice for the response you get from students sometimes, like, you know, well, I'm a student, I'm supposed to learn that. You're supposed to teach me that. I don't want to do these things. You're supposed to teach me.
Okay, so the idea that they really want to take the passive student role, they don't want to actually have to really engage anything beyond maybe coming in, sitting back, putting their feet up for an hour kind of idea, right? Yeah, they're everywhere. I actually had just last week on my evaluations, my midterm evaluation type, or whatever part it is, the idea from a student that he feels in the flipped classroom he has to teach himself a lot of things.
We're learning about learning.
And Jeremiah's referencing something on my syllabus that said we're going to learn how to learn in this class. And basically, you know, yes, my job is to convey biology in my classes because I'm a biologist, but that doesn't mean that the thing you're going to remember most about my class is the biology. Getting to the idea of innovative, creative, kind of problem-solving sorts of things, I don't care what the material is, but we got to find a way to make it manageable for all of us. And I tell my students when, I'm not the only teacher in this room. If there are 250 of us in this room, there are 250 of us that are instructors in some way, because my example may not play to you. And I actually have my students on a fairly regular basis. I'll go over something, and when you have the deer in headlights look. Nobody in the room has, there's like 4 people nodding their heads because they've had this before somewhere, or they're the epitome of RIT and are spending all their time on Google looking all this stuff up while you're talking about it, right? And so I'll stop and say, all right, take 2 minutes and explain what I just said to the person next to you, and then tell me what their questions are about it. Because students will not ask questions. Okay, so there's all kinds of stats about if you have any given class, so they do it based on 100. So out of a class of 100, 5 to 7 students will ask 95% of the questions. That means that I've got 95, roughly, students that will never ask me a single question, but have a lot of them. So this is my way of defacing the questions. And it works best in groups of like 3, because then if you have it in pairs, if person A is really confused, person B says, well, they have questions about this, you know who the question is coming from, and it doesn't dissociate anything for you.
But you're asking them again? You're asking your neighbor and asking?
So I'll say, in your small little area that you're in, somebody explain what I just explained. And now they can ask you the questions, and if you can field the questions, great. You just became the expert on that topic. If you can't field the questions, write them down, and then we're going to talk about them.
And if you overhear them explaining it the wrong way.
Exactly, exactly. And that's when we stop and say, yeah. And that's where my note cards, I know we have a hard stop, Jeremiah, one more thing. I have them right on their note cards. They're usually answering questions for me, a couple of guided questions, but then the last question is always, what was the most confusing point from today? So it gives them an outlet for what didn't click, what didn't sync. And I'll see some of them, they'll write down a point, and then they'll actually cross it out and say, you came back to this and it was much better the second time. And so I can see, and then I'll remember, oh, well, how did I explain it the second time? So I can do it that way every time, right? But it helps them sort of engage a little bit more with the material. So I put a lot of the responsibility back on them. And they know that from day one. And I tell them, I say, you're going to ask me questions I can't answer. But the kid in the back row with his laptop open to Google can. And so I'll call on them. If they've got their laptops open, I'm like, you got to Google this quick. And they will. And then we talk about it. And so it makes them really feel more part of the process. Yeah.
I want to thank Sandi, please join me.
Thanks, guys. It was fun. It was fun.
And I applaud all of you for
Yeah.
demonstrating your willingness to improve the craft of teaching by showing up.
Yeah. If you don't teach on Thursdays, I don't know if anyone here doesn't teach on Thursday. I will shamelessly plug Ed Tech that is going on next week at Ithaca College. It's next Thursday. It's a free day, and lots of vendors come in and say, here are new fancy gadgets that you can use in the classroom for different things. So it's a great thing. They'll have all kinds of presentations throughout the day on how people are using technology in the classroom. This one hasn't gone virtual yet, I don't think. As far as you can sit in your office and attend. I don't think this one's gone quite that far yet. But yeah. Thanks, guys.